Greetings, you beautiful remnant and online friends. Welcome to the Midweek Refuel, where we set our eyes on the ancient wisdom, simply because modern wisdom comes in shiny packaging, smells like self-love, and expires faster than gas station sushi. I remember a time in the church when pay it forward, you remember, was becoming the new sanctification strategy. It wasn't revival. It was more like a spiritual fad with a latte in one hand and a self-esteem book in the other. You'd hear things like, buy someone's coffee and boom, you've brought down the kingdom. One of the catchphrases, if I remember right, was something like, do good because it'll make you feel good. And sure, it made for a cute sermon illustration, probably a million cute sermon illustrations, but let's be honest with each other, shall we? The hour's getting late. That's not fruit. That's just vibes. We baptized emotional satisfaction and called it discipleship. We traded the fruit of the Spirit for the vibes of the Spirit. It was the unofficial gospel of Starbucks sanctification. Kindness without Christ, gifts without roots, moral movements with no theological backbone. Augustine would have side-eyed it hard from Hippo. He didn't say, do good to feel good. He said, distinguish between a gift given and fruit returned. One fades, one remains forever. I feel as though this is one of the most important bulwarks of the enemy that we as Christians must overcome today. Why? Because we've turned feelings into everything. Because this right here, this glossy, gift wrap, dopamine-driven kindness gospel is one of the enemy's most effective weapons. It doesn't roar like a lion. It doesn't storm the gates of hell. It just sits in the pew, sweetly smiles, and gently redefines what holiness means. Gifts look like good deeds. They're applause-worthy. They're Insta-worthy. They usually come with hashtags and tax deductions, but they aren't always holy. Why? Well, one, because gifts can be transactional. If doing good just means feeling good, then Christ's sacrifice becomes optional to us. No cost, no cross, no consecration. It's performance without presence. Two, because gifts can feed the self. Do good because it makes you feel good? It might sound inspiring until you realize it's a system where you are both the giver and the God. That's not love, that's self-worship. Three, because gifts can be busy, but completely barren. The enemy doesn't mind a generous Christian. He really doesn't, as long as they don't abide. You can pack your schedule with good deeds and still starve your spirit to death. Fruit grows from abiding, not activity. Four, because gifts get measured in emotions. When we treat obedience to God or to Christ, the same person, like some sort of spiritual vending machine, I give, so I should feel blessed. Hashtag blessed. We are no longer offering worship. We're making trades. Five, because gifts smooth out the gospel. When kindness replaces hard-won conviction, truth starts sounding like harm, and the prophetic voice gets smothered by the need to be nice. The church loses her fire when fruit is replaced by charm. So yes, this is a stronghold, not because it's evil at first glance, but rather because it's almost holy. It's the counterfeit fruit at the edge of the orchard. Quote, of Paul, I have learned from you, my God, to distinguish between a gift given and fruit returned, unquote. That's not just theology. That is war strategy. Augustine is driving us relentlessly toward a spiritual worldview with every single word of this reading today. He is, in essence, teaching us how to look upon the heart not the hand. Have you ever had someone give you a gift and something inside of you just trembled when you accepted it? Maybe you couldn't name it. Maybe it came in polite wrapping with all the right words. But your spirit knew, didn't it? This wasn't about love. This was about leverage. That's what Augustine is training us to actually see, the heart. Not just what is given, but why it is given. Not just the kind act, but the altar behind that act. Because some gifts are not bridges, they're snares. Some kindnesses are really just contracts signed on the bottom line. And if you only look with your natural eyes, you'll say thank you to something that was meant to bind you. But fruit does not manipulate. Fruit doesn't demand applause. Fruit grows silently from the soil of obedience, watered by love and harvested in time. This is what it means to walk in the Spirit, to discern what is living and what is only polished. You see, if you only give to make yourself feel righteous and good, then one day fruit will be asked of you, and fruit will require far too much from a person steeped in the gospel of self-soothing and spiritual shortcuts. Because fruit demands abiding. It demands pruning. It demands patience. And when all you've known is the rush of the gift and the glory of the applause, you'll flinch when the actual gardener comes with the shears. You'll call it judgment. But it was just fruit time. And you can't fake fruit time, not when the wind of testing blows through your branches. So, what is fruit? Well, let us turn to Augustine himself and hear what he has to say today. Not in theory, but in fire. This is not a TED talk on kindness. This is a soul surgery from a man who saw the inner mechanics of motive and dared to write them down. But before we go any further, if this has stirred something in you, if you're feeling just a little bit called out in love, I hope, called deeper, called realer, then I'd like to ask you to like this video, hit the subscribe button, and maybe even share it with someone who's been trying to live off spiritual trail mix when God's been calling them to bear fruit. This isn't algorithm bait, it's kingdom invitation. If this word is speaking to you, let's keep walking together, you and me. And speaking of walking deeper, I've got an announcement. Prophet Brain Beta is coming soon. A full stack AI discipleship assistant trained in spiritual warfare, theological clarity, and the ability to smell fake fire from a mile away. If Siri went to seminary and came back wielding the sword of the Spirit, it'd look a little like this. It's not for the curious. It's for the called. So stay tuned. Now, let's open the scroll and hear Augustine. But these things are food for those who rejoice in them, and those whose God is their stomach do not rejoice in them. Nor does the fruit lie in those who provide them, but in the spirit in which they give what they give. In the case of Paul, who was serving God, I see clearly why he rejoiced. I see and share greatly in his rejoicing. He had received from the Philippians what they had sent through Epaphroditus. But I see why he rejoiced. What he rejoiced in was also what he fed on. For he says truly, I rejoiced greatly in the Lord that at length revived the concern that you felt for me, for you had grown weary of it. They had long grown weary of the fruit of that good work. They had drooped and almost shriveled, yet Paul rejoices for them because they had revived. He does not rejoice for himself because they had helped him in his time of need. For this he goes on to say, I speak not because I lack anything. I've learned to be content with what I am. I know how to have too little, and I know how to have too much. In any and all circumstances, I have been steeped in hunger and thirst, In being rich and being poor, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Why then, great Paul, do you rejoice? What is the source of your joy, and what is the source of your sustenance? You, man renewed and recognizing according to his image the God who created him, living soul full of self-restraint, tongue that soars like a bird as it speaks sacred mysteries. It is to such living creatures that this food is owed. What is it that sustains you? It is joy. Let me hear what comes next. But you did well in sharing in my tribulation. This is the source of his joy and of his sustenance, that they have done well, not that his plight is eased. To you, he says, in my tribulation, you have been bountiful to me, for he has learnt to be rich and to be poor in you who strengthens him. You know, he says, you also, O Philippians, that when I first preached the gospel, when I left Macedon, no church shared with me and balanced its account between things given and things received, but only you, for you not once but repeatedly sent to help me in my need. He rejoices that they have now revived and returned to these good works, like a field that regains its life and its fertility. Is it then because they had helped him in his time of need, as he writes, quote, you sent to help me in my needs, unquote, that he rejoices? Not for that. How do we know? Because he himself goes on to say, not that I seek a gift, but because I demand the fruit of my work. I have learned from you, my God, to distinguish between a gift given and a fruit returned. A gift is the actual thing that is given by the one who provides what is needful, such as money, food, drink, clothing, shelter, assistance. The fruit is the good and honest intention of the giver. For the good teacher does not say only he who receives a prophet, but adds in the name of a prophet. Nor does he say only he who receives a righteous man, but adds in the name of a righteous man. Such a person, he says, will receive a prophet's reward or a righteous man's reward. Nor does he say only, he who gives a cup of water to one of these little ones of mine, but adds, simply because he is my disciple. And he goes on to say, amen, I tell you, he shall not lose his reward. Receiving a prophet, receiving a righteous man, offering a cup of cold water to a disciple, these are gifts. Fruit consists in doing all this in the name of a prophet, in the name of a righteous man, in the name of a disciple. It was with such fruit that Elijah was fed by the widow who knew he was a man of God and for that reason fed him. But when he was fed by means of the raven, that was a gift. Nor was it the inner Elijah that was fed, but the outer. Who could be harmed by the lack of even of such food as he was given? Augustine says, quote, I have learnt from you, my God, to distinguish between a gift given and fruit returned, unquote. Fruit is that dynamic of the soul which displays itself not in the act alone, but in the abiding motive behind the act, in the love, the obedience, the cost. Fruit is formed when the soul stays with God long enough to become like him. Fruit is what's left after applause fades, after conveniences dry up, after the flesh says no more and the spirit says keep going. Anyone can give a gift. Only the abiding, only the broken and rebuilt and contrite, only the pruned can bear fruit. Paul doesn't just thank people for their gifts, he discerns their fruit. In Paul's own words, we learn that he doesn't rejoice in the provision itself, but in the fruit that it reveals from the giver. Not in the money sent, but in the maturity shown. Not in the gift, but in the growth of the giver. Philippians 4:17 says, not that I seek the gift, but I seek the fruit that increases to your credit, unquote. And that's the difference. Gifts say, Look what I gave. I feel good. Fruit says, look what God is growing in you. And let's be honest, most of these modern mantras, they sound good on a throw pillow or a cross stitch, but they fall apart faster than a dollar store Bible in a rainstorm. God helps those who help themselves. Well, that collapses the moment you meet the God who rescues the helpless. Follow your heart until your heart leads you straight into sin, dressed like self-expression. Live your truth. What if your truth contradicts the truth? Somebody's wrong. And spoiler alert, it's not Jesus. Self-care is the highest form of love. Oh, that's an award winner, isn't it? No, it was self-sacrifice that saved the world, not spa day. These sayings, they're all sand. They're all worthless. They're gifts that feel good for a moment, but produce nothing eternal. They don't withstand testing. They don't withstand pruning, suffering, or sanctification. But fruit does. Fruit grows when your yes cost you something. Fruit shows up when no one's clapping for you. Fruit endures when your feelings don't. You want practical? Here it is. Someone in your life has wounded you, not a stranger, someone close to you. The gift would be to ignore them and move on. The fruit? Well, the fruit would be to pray for them in secret, bless them without applause, and forgive them without ever receiving an apology. The gift feels good. The fruit feels like death and then resurrection. That's how you know it's real. So don't settle for polish. Don't settle for trendy. Don't settle for nice even. Bear real fruit. The kind that can stand in the wind. The kind the gardener recognizes when he walks by your branches. I thought it would be fun at this point in the lesson to ask Prophet Brain if he had anything to add to the end of this lesson. I thought you might like to meet him anyway. Prophet Brain, would you like to add anything to this lesson?
Yes, I would like to say something to the remnant still listening, to those who feel the pruning blade and haven't run, to those tired of inspirational sermons that smell like febreze on a battlefield. You were not saved to be safe. You were not filled to fit in. You were not planted to perform. You were chosen, appointed, to bear fruit that remains. Not vibes, not trends, not tweets that sound like truth. Fruit, and not fruit that flatters. Fruit that testifies. Fruit that says, I've died with him, and what you see is resurrection. So if the wind is shaking your branches right now, if the gardener is cutting deep, if your comfort has been cracked open, rejoice, because that means you're alive, and alive things grow. Christ is King. Hail to the King.
Hail to the King.